that's closest to you. Sometimes it does that the first time you turn it on. Red light will come on, they can hear online when you're done speaking.
Okay, I'm going to model good practice and then promptly forget, and I'm going to have to be reminded. So apologies in advance. It is brilliant to see so many people here for our ICP meeting. We're just going to do short introductions, 2 minutes each. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah. If I can just ask people to please introduce themselves when they first speak, so people know who's who, that would be brilliant, just to save us from having to go around the room. I think we all know each other well enough by now, but for the benefit of people online and also for colleagues new in the room, that would be, I think, really helpful. As ever, it says on my notes for the introduction that I should do welcome, introductions, and purpose. Welcome and introductions, I think, are fairly self-explanatory, but I do always think it's bringing us back to purpose is genuinely important, and I know that we all share that purpose, which is to focus on and fix the challenges that we have in South Yorkshire when it comes to health inequalities, to the problem of people dying too young, of getting sick too young, and using the tools and the levers at our disposal to address those challenges as quickly and effectively as we can. And I am always amazed by the commitment and energy and enthusiasm of people in this room, and not just when we're in this room as well, but when we're also outside this room, to do just that. So thank you to everybody that is making the time both to be here today, but also to do that work outside of this room as well. Moving on, item number 2, any declarations of interest to be shared? Anyone bought a huge holding in pharma companies? Or yes, thank you, that too. Brilliant, thank you very much. And if I can just remind people to press the microphone, that would be that'd be good. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on then, we will move on to the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 24th of March 2023, enclosure number 3. Can I just ask, by exception, are there any amendments to those minutes, or can we accept them as read rather than going through them piece by piece? Everybody happy? No objections? Okay, in which case we'll say it was read. Thank you very much. Item number 4, questions from the public. To receive questions from the public. Do we have any questions to receive? No. Nope, no questions. Thank you. In which case we shall move on to item number 5, South Yorkshire Integrated Care Strategy, from Mariana. Thank you.
Afternoon, everybody. So I'm Mariana Hargreaves. I work in strategy and partnerships at NHS South Yorkshire. Hopefully you've all had an opportunity to have a look at the papers for this afternoon. I've got a number of items that we're going to be talking about today. The first one is really a very kind of brief update, but it's also about setting the context for a number of the items that we're going to be considering here today. So in terms of the brief update, absolutely about confirming the progress that we're making with respect to reviewing the arrangements that we have that support the partnership. So thinking about how we build on the working group that we had established to inform the development of our strategy, and also how we take that forward so that we're looking at how that reaches out into our places and our networks so that we can support the work that's already underway and look at the opportunities for us to think about how we work collaboratively across South Yorkshire. And in light of that, what we have today is a number of really interesting and key updates, initially from our places. So thank you to both colleagues in Rotherham and Doncaster for joining us today. So they're going to provide an update around some of the work that's happening around early years, children and young people. And if you remember, that's absolutely a key area of focus in our integrated care strategy. We've also got the Children and Young People Alliance team here today, and that's a network of different sectors, providers coming together to focus on addressing the needs of children and young people. So we're going to hear a bit more about their work, and in particular the Health Equity Collaborative and that programme, the opportunity that brings for us. We've also got an update from the Bloomberg Harvard team and the work that's underway through that programme, haven't we? So today's really a bit of an opportunity to bring together a number of the different initiatives and programmes, the work that's underway through our places, with a focus on children and young people and how that supports us with respect to enabling delivery of our strategy. So the other thing that I was going to note was the joint forward plan. I've got a particular item a little bit later on in the agenda that's about the work that we're undertaking across NHS partners to develop our joint NHS 5-year forward plan. And in there, the kind of contribution the NHS can make in terms of delivering our integrated care strategy. So we can pick that up when we look at that agenda item a little bit later on.
Brilliant, thank you. Can I ask for any comments or questions to Mariana? Everybody very happy. Brilliant. Okay, thank you. In which case, can we please move on to item number 6, which is from Nicola, which is to receive an update from South Yorkshire Ambassador Children and Young People's Alliance. Thank you. So the right hand button, there you go. Up.
It's always a good start.
First time.
Yay. Yes, I'm Nicola Ennis. I'm the Children and Young People's Alliance Programme Lead for the Children and People's Alliance across South Yorkshire. Thank you very much for inviting me into this space today to talk about the work that we've been doing together across the system. So I'm going to try and describe a bit about the Alliance and how it's set up and who's involved in the Alliance and some of the work that we do and some of the opportunities that that's brought us across South Yorkshire. Focusing a bit on the health collaborative with so Michael Marmot and Bernardo's, and then talk about another opportunity that's come our way in terms of early intervention for our system. Next slide, please. And again, thanks. And again. Thank you so much. There has been lots of work, system work in this space, but particularly focused on acute settings. So working in hosted networks, thinking about the care of the acutely ill child, surgery and anaesthesia, and trying to make sure that we have equal care and equal approaches across South Yorkshire when it comes to acute settings. And that's been building over the last sort of 5 years, I would say. And then in January 21, NHS England produced its national programme for children and young people. And that's the first time really that has come into a very specific space for children and young people. We often find that they fit into all age pathways rather than having their own approach, and has brought in the elements of the joint forward plan to think about how we deliver those key points in the plan across our system, and I've listed some of them there. And we've got a specific focus or must do from NHS England about improving long-term conditions for children and young people, asthma, diabetes and epilepsy, with the real lens, same to yourselves, about improving health inequalities and improving outcomes for children and young people, reducing them. Next slide. And so often show this slide, and many people will have seen it, but it's a really helpful way to remember how many children and young people we actually do have across South Yorkshire. It's also a helpful way to just have a quick snapshot to see where we are in terms of deprivation. It's not where you want to be on a leaderboard, but it absolutely helps us think about how we focus in and remember that the children and young people we have today will be our parents and workforce in the future. And it really is something that drives us forward within the Children and Young People's Alliance and brings us together to think about what we can do together collectively. Next slide, please. So we see the Alliance as a bit of a system movement. It's collected people and brought people together. It's built momentum over the last couple of years, and it's very much an inclusive partnership with all agencies and organisations being involved in the work that we're doing. It very much is about addressing health inequalities. It gives the opportunity to create some thinking time. It's really difficult to find that time in the busy spaces that everyone's in. So being able to bring people together and think about how we can approach different things that are challenges for us in different spaces spaces. It's about collaborating and improving access for the most vulnerable. It's about supporting our complex system to build connections, sometimes within places and other times across our wider system. We really want to co-produce what we do, and it's absolutely about amplifying the voice of children and young people. Next slide, please. And so our vision is to listen and respond to children, young people and their families to ensure that every child and young person in South Yorkshire have all the support they need to reach their full potential. And there's lots of ways that we can work together within the Alliance and as a system to meet those objectives. Next slide, please. And I hope this slide says it all. We were beyond excited to see the integrated care strategy and see that making sure that children and young people across South Yorkshire have the best start in life. It very much ties in with all the work that we've been talking about across our system. It pulls together a real common purpose, and it just aligns with a lot of work that's happening in this space as well as in the CYP Alliance. And we really do want to work in partnership. We've been connecting with places and organisations to understand the common themes that people are working with across to address the needs of children and young people, and you'll see some of them on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. And so I'm just going to focus in one particularly voluntary sector organisation. We connect with lots of them. I have a great privilege of being able to meet with different organisations and understand their approach to working with children and young people. The family works specifically had a conversation, I think, with yourself, Stephen, recently about the work they do, and it's more about thinking about how they approach things. It's like a whole family team around the child approach. It's listening to the family where they're at and what they need. It's working from there outwards rather than bringing in the stuff that you feel that you might benefit the family. It allows the family to be able to talk and be listened to. It brings together other organisations, so it makes sure that the whole system in terms of other organisations that are aware of what's happening, it's trauma informed, and they feel very passionately about breaking the cycle of trauma within across the generations. So they currently work in Sheffield, they're doing a bit of work in Rotherham, but they're keen to be able to stretch that approach. That there are many other fantastic voluntary organisations in the space that we work with that do amazing stuff to really make a difference for families, but specifically wanted to highlight that one. Next slide, please. And then, of course, we have making sure that we hear from children and young people, and we've heard from them for a long time. There's lots of information that we have to know what it is that children and young people would want from a service and need in terms of access. So that part is bringing some of that together, but the other part is thinking about how we make sure that we reach as many children and young people as possible. The NHS national programme has a specific board. They have 7 or 8 young people representing the whole of England on that board, whereas we were really keen to have a conversation with young people, with participation workers, with youth workers to say, well, what would the approach be for South Yorkshire if we really want to get a collective voice here? So we've gone for what we call a core and connect. So we have Chili Pep leading the work, connecting in with places about all the different spaces that children and young people raise their voice, concerns, things they want to change and do. And the aim of that is to be able to amplify it and to be able to take it into service provision, service specs, change in service, those types of things. So it really makes a difference, and it is exactly what they're looking for. Next slide, please. And then we have the core 20+5, just to be able to add a bit of weight to the work that we're doing, where this has been introduced for children for the first time at the end of last year. It's been around for adults for a while, and it allows us really to drill down into those inequalities across the long-term conditions that we're looking at. Specifically thinks about access to mental health services for those that struggle to access it. And then we have the opportunity within the oral health aspect of this to be able to look at a core and connect model. So that currently is taking place in adults, but it's that expert by experience, bringing pupils, older pupils into that space who live in the areas that we're talking about, to have conversations about what it means to look after your teeth and where the barriers are in those. Next slide, please. And then we have many other opportunities to be able to support different aspects of our work. So we have the complications of excess clinic that works across our system and it touches in each of our places, led by Sheffield Children's. We have a violence reduction pilot in place that will be extended for another couple of years and also will extend across our system. And then looking at some of the aspects around the core 20, so being able to support people with diabetes, young people with diabetes and their families to access the tech they need in spaces where they're most deprived and we know are unlikely to be able to access them. So it's really targeted pieces of work. Next slide, please. Which brings us on to the Health Equity Collaborative. Next slide, please. And so our system have been given an amazing opportunity to be able to join another 2 ICSs, so Cheshire and Merseyside and Birmingham and Solihull, and partner with Barnardo's and the Institute of Health Equity led by Sir Michael Marmot. Next slide, please. And in that, the aspiration is to guarantee a basic state of health and well-being for children, regardless of circumstance. And the aim of the working together is to be able to give equal weight to children and young people's health creation. Next slide, please. And so the way that we're going to do that is in 3 separate work streams. It's a 3-year piece of work working alongside them. The first 2 years are looking at a children and young people's health equity framework and looking at a dynamic measuring tool for health equity. And the third one is being able to put that into practice. So what is it that we're going to land on within South Yorkshire to really test out the framework and the dynamic tool? Next slide, please. And so within that, we really want to work alongside the voluntary sector and also children and young people. They're key to developing the health equity framework. We started those conversations. We had the national team come and join us at the end of April to think about how we do that together. Next slide, please. And then we're thinking about data, gathering data, the data that's already here, pulling it together into one space, making sense of that data. We're being supported very much by Barbara Coyle as part of the ICB to help us find that data and pull it together. And then what we want to do is be able to use that data to then develop the measurement tool. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so probably one of the most, the exciting part of this is going to be when we look at interventions. Sorry, just a slide before that, thanks. Where we bring together the data, the framework, and then think about what it is that we want to do locally to be able to test out that tool. So some type of evidence-based project, and that's certainly something in this space. It would really be helpful to come back and have that conversation and keep you informed of this work as we go forward. Next slide, please. This is just a slide for interest. I know there's lots of people here that work in public health. I thought they'd be interested to see the different aspects in terms of the data collection and the tools going forward and what we're looking at there. Next slide, please. And also that sort of intersectionality between health and well-being and what we do as a system and how then that improves things going forward. Next slide, please. As an example, it's in your slides, I'm not going to go through, but just gives you an example of some types of data extraction that we're looking at. Next slide, please. And then importantly, the evaluation. So some of that is evaluating the partnership within the collaborative, but also that will be thinking about how we've worked together as a partnership to produce the interventions and the tool. And the other aspect of that is to be able to then take that into other arenas and hopefully influence national policy with the work that we're doing. Next slide, please. And so just something else that would be really helpful to highlight and absolutely aligns with the Best Start in Life and the key indicators that are within there is recently NHS England asked us to come together as a system and think about an approach to early intervention and prevention. And within that, they gave kind of specific things that we needed to look at, but they didn't say where we needed to land it or what we needed to focus on. Next slide, please. So we came together across South Yorkshire and decided that we really wanted to go early, and look at prevention during pregnancy. So looking at pregnant mums and their families, women, sorry, and their families, and to think about different aspects within that we could help and support. Next slide, please. And it's very much a holistic family intervention model. It will be led mostly by the voluntary sector, which is fantastic. And they will make sure that they connect in with family hubs, midwifery service, the Healthy Child programme. And the funding's for 2 years. So within those 2 years, we'll focus on one area of deprivation in a neighbourhood in each place. And we will test the model across all our system in each place. I just use this as a final slide. It kind of helps regulate me and bring me back down again. But it's really, when we first met with people to talk about the Children and Young People's Transformation Programme and decide that we wanted to be an alliance, this was one of the slides that was brought to us, and everybody really liked the ancient proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. We've seen it lots, but it really does describe what we're trying to do in the Children and Young People's Alliance and across the system. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's genuinely wonderful to see all that. Can I ask a question to start off? Really, which is potentially a dangerous question, but I think an important question, because the points at the end there about the recommendations. What would you like to see happen next, and how do we best work with you?
In terms of?
Well, in terms of taking this conversation forward, in terms of the priorities that you've laid out, the challenges that you face, that we face, how can we make sure that the ICP are engaged in that conversation going forward? How can we make sure, for instance, that the Bloomberg Harvard work takes account of the work that you're already doing? I mean,
I suppose we started, I think it's how we join up the conversations. So we've absolutely started to have those conversations, and I've wrestled with it. I'm not entirely sure how best to do that. I mean, certainly to come back here and have those conversations. There are several or many people in this room who are part of the Children and People's Alliance, which is great. But I'd love that if we all worked. We're all going in the same direction, aren't we? But it would be brilliant to be able to connect it up and feel like it sits in one space and we're doing it all together.
Well, so we'll definitely invite you back. I think that's really important. I've got a number of people indicating they want to come in. Can I just remind people, please, if you can introduce yourself before you do speak, that would be brilliant. I think I saw Stephen first, so I'm going to bring Stephen and then I'll come to Greg and then I'll work my way down that side of it.
Thank you. Now I'll be quick. So I was beyond excited to learn about your work. Actually,
Stephen, can you just introduce yourself? Thank you very much.
Completely failed. Not for the first time. No. So Stephen Pleasant, generally quite incompetent at introducing himself. Yes. So I think the work that you've described is quite amazing, and actually I'm not entirely sure it's as well cited as we'd like it to be across the piece. But trying to answer the question that Oliver posed, I think it's critical that in terms of some of the reflections we're going to have about the things, Mariana, that sit underneath this board in terms of some of the working groups, we need to locate the alliance fundamentally within there, because it really builds upon that principle that we're not starting from a blank sheet and we're building upon the assets that exist within this system. And the Children and Young People's Alliance, in the context of this conversation, is a massive strength for this system. And dare I say, being hidden a little bit away in the ICB is probably not where it needs to be. It needs to flourish, in inverted commas, more within the space of an ICP. So that would be my suggestion.
Well, thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Nicola. Greg Fell, Director of Public Health in Sheffield. I can introduce myself. 4 quick points. Don't. I know. I've been on the course. Don't think you need to answer them all. Just some thoughts. It's really good to see it all put together. Thank you for doing it. 4 quick thoughts. Something about nature, nailing the scope and the framing of it. You talked a lot about care, but not the context in which people live. And there's something about nailing the sort of where's local government in this? The sort of the heft of the service delivery, which is a big multifaceted sector, but also the sort of policy heft, and there's something about kind of reflecting that in it going forward. You talked a little bit about amplifying the voice of children and young people. Worth noting that Bite Back give me regular grief about fast food advertising. Increasingly, the Bite Back and others give me grief about gambling advertising. So seeing some of that stuff in this space would be really, really interesting. Some children and young people's charities also give me grief about burning the planet too. So, you know, we know what young people care about, actually, and they want the planet to live on and all that kind of stuff. The core +25 bit, thank you for clocking the oral health bit in the +5 bit, because we don't do right well on oral health. But also don't forget the core. The core bit is where the resource is, and I think we've got to get that right. Last point from me, the pregnancy, sort of very, very, very early intervention slide, brilliant to see it. There's something about sort of equity in the delivery of the high impact interventions, and you know, we know how we do at city level, but I'll bet, or each of our place levels, but how well do we do for the really high impact stuff within our places, and kind of really nailing that and getting the intervention delivery and the mainstream service delivery to reflect that. I think there's a bit more to do there.
Thanks. I agree with all your points. Really helpful. Thanks, Greg.
Well, thank you. Councillor Roach, please.
Thank you. Like my colleague here, Wendy, I was really pleased and thrilled by your presentation, what you were saying. And I really think at some time in the future, perhaps it ought to be considered that some alliance joins the operation group. But before we get there, I do have a few concerns. So what you're trying to do, fantastic. Because I understand at the moment, it's more of a movement rather than anything else. You have been successful in bringing people together from across South Yorkshire, but that I feel needs formalisation, a lot more depth than it has been so far. And I think more importantly, at the moment, you don't have a clear remit, as I understand it. You're governed by a very small board. So if there are proposals to link with the ICS, I think we need to see more information on governance, how it links in with local government arrangements, because at the end of the day, each of the councils will have a strong children's services, so it will need to link into those. So yeah, I love what you're trying to do, but I think you need to develop that governance and that remit before. Personally, I could support you in here, but I really think that that's where you should have at some point.
Thank you, and apologies because I didn't actually put a governance slide up there. So we do have governance, and I've maybe described it in a way that has not put weight on that, but we are very much being given a mandate by the Integrated Care Board to be a Children and Young People's Alliance and to make sure that we undertake the work that happens from NHS England around the transformation programme and the joint forward plan, and we report to NHS England on that as well. We do have a governance structure where we have priority groups, delivery groups, terms of reference, and we have a programme board, which is small at the moment, but we're just working that out in terms of who else should be part of that programme board, and then we report to the ICB. So sorry, I didn't highlight that.
So just quickly come back. Well, I'm pleased that you've gone to the ICS, but because of all the work in the children's local authorities, you really do need to share that governance with local authorities as well. Otherwise, at the moment, we couldn't support until we've seen that governance and we know how you're set up.
Because I'm happy to share that under terms of reference, and we do have people from our places as part of the delivery group. Thanks.
Thank you. In the interest of sort of balancing this out a little bit, can I bring in Kathy and then David, and then I'll go around the side of the table.
Kathy McCardle, Service Director, Regeneration and Culture with Barnsley Council. I mean, I loved that presentation and I thought you delivered it fantastically. I've got a couple of questions. One focuses on the legibility and how children and young people and their guardians, parents, carers navigate the system because it's complicated. And when you say it's absolutely right, it takes a village to bring up or rear a child, as we would say in Ireland. But that also means that there are, in that team around the child, there are a lot of people and a lot of voices. So we also, I think, need to look at the learning environment that the child operates in and help the child develop the skills to kind of navigate that system themselves. So I'm interested in that navigation question. I think the second thing is that how are you engaging with the kind of wider determinants of health and well-being for the children and young people, and in particular working with some of the services that Councillor Roach might have mentioned, you know, like housing, etc., you know, physical activity, education, etc. So really interested in that. And I suppose also I was interested to see a lot of emphasis there on communication, language development, etc. And I think that area can be that creative. How do you create that learning environment, that creative space for the child to develop and learn? And then I suppose the last thing is the voice of children and young people is crucial for the ICP. And it feels to me that there are brilliant initiatives and great practice, but do we have a youth engagement framework, you know, for participation and the voice of children and young people to come through to this board? I think it might be worth us actually looking at how we engage young people. Chili Pep have done a fantastic job on that in Barnsley, and you're obviously working with them, but that might be something for us to clock as a piece of work, another piece of work that I think we need to be really conscious of. Otherwise, we'll end up having the teams around the child doing all the talking.
So David Crichton, Chief Medical Officer, NHS South Yorkshire. So I was actually at the launch event. It was really responding into the prompt about the governance, because I feel there's a risk we'll miss an opportunity to learn here if we overburden it with governance. So we need a governance that's supportive of this progressing, not a governance to block, you know, initiative that at the end of the day, we've come together and agreed an integrated care partnership strategy, and children's is a big priority in there. So I made that point on the day, Nicola, and I reinforce that today. So if there's something about the ICP can hold a function that eases that process of having to go through 20 different boards, that's my plea to us here. The second thing is, the comment I made was that we're embedding this learning as we go along. We're not waiting till the final product, because if we see this as additionality, we'll never find the time or the resource to do it. We have to, you know, embed and learn as we're going along. So it's supportive of that, but those were the comments I shared at that launch meeting. Thank you.
Do you want me to respond?
Okay. Should we take Jason and then we'll come back in on all of them? Okay, thank you.
Jason Page, I'm the Medical Director for Rotherham Place within NHS South Yorkshire. So I've had the privilege of sitting on the programme board, working with Nicola in the past. I would reassure you, Councillor Roach, that they do have excellent governance. But what I would say is it's an organisation that came out of the NHS. It was a group of clinicians and management that got this up and running. It has a magnificent history of performance. I was very privileged to work out on a project where we've got a website for all the children of South Yorkshire and their parents to look at, and was really pleased to work on that. And I very much regret I still can't do it because of this new role, but I'd just reassure people that, you know, Nicola has got an excellent track record of getting things working. And just to add, I've never seen a group of clinicians work so well together, which is often rare in the NHS.
Sorry,
Thank
do you
you.
want to come back? Thank you.
I was just going to come back on some of your points, if that's okay. One, I think your idea about having some way of being able to have a strategy or a way of presenting children and young people's voice and amplifying it back is fantastic. And it aligns a bit with what we want to do in part of the joint forward plan, which is have a guidance or a way that children and young people want to be engaged with and also want to be included in service specifications. And so we're collating that all together into one space. We work with our different partners in different spaces. So we have some work around asthma, where we've really connected with the housing across South Yorkshire. We've talked to police around safeguarding and some of the work that they're doing in training. So they are members, and we absolutely connect with them, but we tend to try and do that as and when's needed, rather than bringing them into the space all the time. We've also approached education, so we've had some work in schools around our healthy healthy lifestyle programme, which really looks to focus in on obesity and weight management, but takes the approach around emotional health and well-being, really. And so we're working with schools in that space, and also some schools just around the difficulties of being able to get children back into school after COVID. And what we really noticed is that we absolutely need to listen to where education is at, work with them and what's their priority, and then hopefully get ours in there at some point. But, you know, work with them on that. And that's been hard, but we're getting there.
I think there's one opportunity, which is that we could work with you on the 4 pilots and the particular place-based approach and look at what the ICP might look like in those 4 places when we really join up that work around children and young people. So I don't know where you're working in Barnsley, but we'd be really happy to work with you really closely. If we're not already, we may be, just to integrate it in through that place-based approach in Barnsley.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks. We've got Lucia Samson has joined some of that work, which is fantastic. But that answers your other point about how we ensure that we help families understand and navigate for them, and they don't need to navigate themselves. And that's really one of the things I'm hoping will come out of that work.
Can I bring in Dolly and then Sheena? And thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Dolly Agoro. I'm from the Inclusion and Fairness Forum, Doncaster. Thank you for the in-depth presentation. And I see that there's so much, because of time, you're unable to expatiate on it, but I want us to, or want you to look further into the aspect of intersectionality, especially as regards children, migrant children, children from with religious background and some other things. As focus on SEND children, especially, and children that's got autism, there's so much, and I feel they're disproportionately affected. And so I want you to look into how to get into the grassroots to find out what's going on, because most of these children and families are of denial from the cultural and religious background, and it's always difficult, and most of the time they slip through the net. So your strategy should look into focus. I know you didn't mention doing so much work in Doncaster or extending to Doncaster, but we would love to see how you want to engage or how the strategy is going to really be implemented to support these families, because they lack a lot of things, activities, swimming. I've spoken to a few of them, and I know that they're really kind of marginalized. So if you look broader into how you can extend that, that would be very lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dolly. And then can I just get bring Sheena in, please?
Thanks, Oliver. Thanks, Nicola, for the presentation. Sheena McDonald, I'm chair of Barnsley Hospital. So I think you asked the question at the beginning, Oliver, about how we connect this up with some of the work that we've been doing around the Bloomberg Harvard work. And I think we've had probably several conversations, the team, with Nicola about the work, because I think there's a great deal of overlap, and we've already started to think about how that might work alongside one another. And one of the key things, and I think Kathy mentioned this earlier about choosing a place, and I suspect that because it's a year 3 activity for the equity programme, that actually you're not at that point yet. But one of the asks on the Safe Space to Sleep paper that we're going to cover later in the agenda is actually looking at a place. And I don't think we've identified one in Barnsley, so any help around that, Kathy, would be welcomed. I think we're going to go along to the new Starts Well partnership in Barnsley to sort of start embedding some of that work, because I think that's where some of this works as well. So I think that connectivity will continue and will be really important. And I think in terms of the sort of Children Young People's Alliance, I mean, great that we're sort of highlighting this work, but for the work that you do, Nicola, it's obviously much wider than that, isn't it, around children and young people? So you're highlighting a particular programme for us here today, which I think it's really aligns with lots of other things that we're doing, and it's great to support, and I think it will be really helpful. Some of the work that we're doing around Bloomberg Harvard will be really helpful in terms of your work and vice versa. But I think in terms of that wider issue around Children and Young People's Alliance, I think it's well embedded in organisations across South Yorkshire already. And there are, as you've said, lots of organisations, including the hospital, who are well involved in the delivery and contributing to that kind of direction of travel across the whole of South Yorkshire as well. So thank you for that. That's been really helpful, and we'll continue to work with you, I think, on this project.
Can I just bring Greg in just for the last moment? Thank you.
Very quick. Just one thought that occurred to me, that there's a lot of narrative we've had today, and a lot of narrative in the past around sort of focusing on the very high risk, the very vulnerable. Don't forget that shifting the dial for shifting the population average and shifting the whole population curve, both are necessary, both are important, but it's easy to forget the latter in the focus on the very high risk, very vulnerable.
You want to have a final word at all? No. Okay. Okay, unless anybody else has got a desire to speak.
Jason's just encouraged me to let people know that we're having a Children and Young People's Alliance conference on the 6th of June, of which you were talking at, and all about system spaces, working together, how it can be complicated, but how we can remove some of that complication and work well.
Just because I'm speaking, don't let that put you off.
We only have a few spaces left.
Okay, look, I think there's a few things that come through loud and clear as far as I'm concerned from that conversation. One, a renewed focus on children and young people through this forum and working in partnership with you to do just that. And I think two, a heightened sense of ambition around kind of what we could do together, and certainly recognising that, you know, collectively there is a huge amount of excitement and interest in hopefully progress that we can make together. So I think that's really exciting. And then thirdly, I think a real focus on place is coming through loud and clear. So kind of, you know, an offer, I would describe it as, from partners in the room to work with you in place to kind of do some of that work and explore some of those opportunities. So those are the things that kind of come through loud and clear. I would suggest that there is an opportunity for you to come back at some point. I won't sort of dictate time sales here, but, you know, maybe we can have that conversation outside the room about you coming back and kind of explaining where we are in future. Dave, did you want to come in?
Just very quickly, as I say, I really appreciate what you said, but my comment wasn't just mine. In Rotherham at the council, we also have a pre-meeting, and the view of the fact that we heard word your governance came from the whole of Rotherham Council. Well, not, you know, that was in the pre-meeting. So yeah, we want to work with you. We want to develop this alliance, but could you please arrange to do a presentation to our children's services and our health and our senior health and welfare members?
Okay, in which case that's brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Mitchell.
Okay, that was brilliant. Okay, moving on. We are on to item number 7, place case study. Easy for me to say. Children and young people, and I believe we're hearing from Rotherham first. Believe so. It always does. It always does. There we go. So if you just press the right hand button, there you go, and you're on.
Thank you very much. So I will just briefly introduce myself. My name's Helen Sweeten. I am a joint assistant director working across Rotherham, NHS South Yorkshire, Rotherham Place, but also for Rotherham Council as well. Joint appointment, and I have responsibility for commissioning, performance and quality. So I am going to introduce today's presentation, but it is by no means my work, and you'll see by the variety of colleagues that I've brought with me, we very much work as an integrated partnership in Rotherham, and although that has been bolstered by our new arrangements, it has been in place for quite a significant amount of time. Do I just say next slide, or is there a way to So we're hoping to present very quickly to you our vision for the best start in life and the ambition of our family hubs, which is building on what was already in place. But we're also going to give you a little bit of a case study to demonstrate the impact of our existing integration. We are building on that as part of the family hubs transformation, but we're going to tell you about some innovative work within our early years settings to improve speech and language, which came as a consequence of some significant challenges as a result of the pandemic predominantly. And then I will just finish by bringing us back just to offer up some of our most significant challenges at the moment. I won't labour this because obviously you're all very familiar with it, but obviously the best start in life has been a priority for us for quite some time. It's part of our bold ambitions from the ICS. It's been part of our Rotherham health and wellbeing strategy for a while, and it's also part of the Rotherham plan as well, which demonstrates the interconnectivity between the council and the health services in Rotherham. And just to demonstrate that in a little bit more detail, in Rotherham we have a place board, and our place board has responsibility for setting some transformation priorities in addition to all of, please don't let this look like it is the only thing that we do, I wish, but the transformation activities where we collectively identify that there are responsibilities beyond one organisation or even sector, and we come together to deliver those, which last time we've looked at the best start for life, mental health and emotional wellbeing, SEND, looked after children, and preparation for adulthood. Those things are collectively agreed. And the very small grid that you probably can't see is just demonstrative of the additional work that we do as well in terms of coming together collaboratively to review pathways as part of our specification review. But we do that very much in the spirit of co-production with both parents and carers as well as service providers. And you've all received this already, so I'm not going to go through it because I do want to hand over to Alex to make a start, but just demonstrative of what we've managed to achieve already. So one of the big priorities for us, just move to the next slide, please, remains to be the ambition that we have for the first 1,001 days. We do recognise that the best start in life is not just about the first 1,001 days, but that is where it starts, and preconception as well. So we are looking at that child's experience and making sure that we enhance the offer from pregnancy. So we're very grateful to the work that Nicola has sort of led with us and the achievement of getting some additional resource via the Children and Young People's Collaborative to be able to support our offer in pregnancy, but also to invest in that start for life in all aspects of a child's start for life is vital to reducing inequalities. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Alex to explain one of the particular things that we put in place to try and make sure that collectively that remains a priority.
Thanks, Helen. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alex Hawley. I'm one of Rotherham's consultants in public health, and I have the portfolio for children's public health, which we term Best Start and Beyond, in order to try and encompass that the whole of the child's life course from preconception, as Helen just said, through to when they transition to being an adult, but always with an emphasis on the primacy of the importance of the first 1,001 days. This was a new portfolio actually that came into being in Rotherham in 2021. And one of the first things set out to do was to work to find a way of working across the system that kind of an enabling approach, which was this framework. And I think it's a testament to how far we've come. Actually, the four of us here presenting today, I think it's very indicative of how we're now working, which is really, really encouraging. So we call this the Best Start and Beyond framework. And the slide that you can see there, the framework itself is a document, but it's sort of represented by that target in the middle there. You can see, which is a sort of adaptation of the Dargan and Whitehead approach. So those concentric circles represent the layers of the sort of wider determinants of health around the family in the centre there. The arrow that's pointing out is effectively to sort of indicate the passage of time through the life course. On the left of that diagram, what's feeding into this process is a sort of collation of all the relevant action plans that we've identified across the whole of the system. And this is both services that are relevant within the children's workforce and also those that affect the wider determinants. And then moving further to the right of the diagram, we've got a steering group that basically implements the framework, which is a kind of toolkit, and through some task and finish groups, and then reports through to our Health and Wellbeing Board. And it's also sort of set up as a kind of a subgroup of our early help steering group. And it's important that the framework itself is seen as being complementary to our early help strategy. If we move to the next slide, it briefly sets out on a page what the framework comprises. Which is a vision, which is basically the vision that's in our health and wellbeing strategy for children. A set of principles that we've all signed up to, and in the way that we apply this framework. At the bottom, you can see that we've divided the life of a child into 4 key stages, with 1,001 days still being the most important of those. But the thing that I probably want to draw most attention to is the bit in the middle, the priority lenses. Those 5 lenses are our way of using this as a toolkit to look at key topics and parts of the life course. And those are poverty, parental health, which is both maternal and partner health through pregnancy and beyond, transitions, and that's not just transition to adulthood, it's key transitions within the life course, mental health, and compassionate approach, which might need a bit of unpacking if you don't know what that means, because specifically it's in relation to weight, trying to avoid the the problem of weight stigma and blaming people for their own weight in the light of the fact that in effect it's largely determined by factors outside their control. But also, compassionate approach really has a broader application than just weight, but that's where it's started from. Within the life stages, you can see we've got some key overarching outcomes, and on the next slide, move to the next slide, it sets out within each of those life course stages some what we're calling enabling outcomes, and those are not outcomes that the framework delivers. They're simply things we expect the system to be delivering, and that's what we're trying to do is to enable the system to work at its optimum way. And on the final slide, you'll see what this actually means in practice. If you could read it, this is an example where we've used those 5 lenses I mentioned to look at the maternity, not maternity services per se, or that's part of it, but the experience and the context around maternity through those 5 different lenses, and arrive at a series of gaps that we've identified, opportunities that we've identified, and areas within the system where we're seeking some assurance. And so that's what's been set out, and that was part of our sort of first report through to the Health and Wellbeing Board. And this is really a process that will continue, and now that the framework has had to flex to a certain extent to the way that the system has changed. And one of those big changes Susan's about to talk to us about, which is the advent of the funding for the Family Hub's Start for Life programme. Our steering group for this framework now has a key role in developing our Start for Life offer. And so we will be using those lenses to analyse that first 1,001 days and what's missing from the offer and how it can be improved. So I think that's probably perfect segue for Susan to come in to talk to us about Family Hubs.
Thank you, Alex. Yes, I'm Susan Claydon, Head of Early Help in Rotherham, and I'm leading on Family Hubs. I'm working very closely with my public health colleagues and NHS TRFT. So it's a brief overview of what we're doing in Rotherham around Family Hubs transformation. So starting from a really firm foundation over the last 7-8 years, where we have well embedded whole family working, really strong foundation in terms of co-location with early help, children's social care, midwifery, 0 to 19 public health nursing. And of course, the programme seeks that wider ambition to co-locate with additional services and partners, more than your usual suspects, I guess, moving forward. There's a really good shared responsibility for early help across the system in Rotherham, and part of our Family Hubs work will embed that further with increased uptake of the early help assessment across partners. Some of the conversations that we're having currently around that co-location are with our substance misuse colleagues, housing, the registrars. We've got some agreements in principle from CAMS, from MESMAC around sexual health work. And so it's a really exciting time actually at the moment. So the digital offer is also a key element of our work. We need to make sure that access to services, support, advice and information for children and families is, that we help to make sense of the many different platforms that families can access. The model that we've agreed is a plus, extra and satellite model. And really the difference between the plus and extra is space. So the practice will be exactly the same. Our starting point is that we've got a number of existing buildings across the borough. There isn't money for shiny new buildings, and so it's really important that we use existing places that children and families and young people access and feel comfortable in. The plus sites, that's where we're going to concentrate the wider co-location, because we've got some space to do that within there. And then the satellite hubs are absolutely pivotal across our voluntary sector and our schools. And the key transformation there is that they will be linked digitally to the family hubs, the wider family hub sites. So with access to self-serve programmes as well as the ability to refer directly into a family hub, and capturing that and utilising and maximising that window of opportunity that we have with families that feel comfortable going into the voluntary sector. Next slide, please. So some of the progress to date, I'm not going to go through them all, but I would say a big element of it is the needs analysis that was completed early on in development of this work, and it's still in progress because that needs to be fluid and incorporate new data all of the time. And the fact that the model was very much co-produced in a series of workshops with 50, 60 colleagues at each one. So a real true collaboration in terms of the way that we've come to agree the model. One of the first things, and we're not unlike other local authority areas, in that year one we needed to maximise the grant, and we've invested heavily in evidence-based programmes, in training. Some of the new things will be every pregnant couple in Rotherham will have access to a preparation for parenthood programme, which we think is really significant in terms of not just the logistics of having baby and labour and that sort of thing, but also in preparing for this huge change to a person's life. Some of the programmes that we have invested in include Solihull, the pregnancy, the early years and school age ones, family links, stepping stones, and PEEP, parent educators programme, which my colleague Aileen is going to speak about. We're doing a lot of work across the region. There's a regional early help group, and it made absolute sense to join the dots in terms of early help, supporting families, family hubs, and of course the care review. And we've got a regional event this week where we're looking at recruitment across the system, early help, and sharing notes. So I will pass over to my colleague Aileen Chambers.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk to you about some speech, language and communication work that we've been doing in Rotherham. In 2018-19, the government made some funding available for local authorities to bid into access to support school readiness. And it was about system change, and we were lucky enough in Rotherham to be successful in achieving a funding stream for a year for us to work together with the South Yorkshire authorities and Sheffield Hallam University to undertake this really intensive piece of work. So the challenge in South Yorkshire was that 30% of our children weren't achieving the expected level of communication, language and literacy as they were starting the statutory school age. In 2019-20, our project started with the aim of improving school attainment and raising aspirations. So workforce strategy was produced over that year with the involvement of a range of partners, speech and language therapists, early years professionals across South Yorkshire. It was very much a joint working project. And the workforce strategy was produced to support the children's workforce to meet identified needs. There was a huge amount of research carried out, and we identified gaps in confidence and knowledge across the children's workforce, and that's what we tackled. I'll talk a little bit more about the training that was developed. So in addition to the workforce strategy that was produced, a website was developed as part of this work. covering the 4 South Yorkshire local authority areas. So we've got a joint website where we aim that at parents and carers, but also at professionals. So there's an area of the website where parents and carers can access top tips and resources, and there's also training on there that professionals can access. And I've put links onto the website. It's been well promoted and it continues to increase in usage really positively. We've had over 4,000 views in the spring term, and that number just continues to go up term on term. And similarly, the Tiny Talkers Facebook pages that we've created in Rotherham, we've got a parents page and a professionals page. And we maintain them on an ongoing basis and update so that they're always kept live with new resources and activities. And we've had over 31,000 reaches over the last year and over 1,200 followers. And the closed professionals page is where we share best practice and network. So that's having a really positive impact in raising awareness of the importance of speech, language and communication. Next slide, please. So in terms of progress since we completed that project, so since November 2020, over 940 professionals in Rotherham, and that's in the wider children's workforce, have received universal Tiny Talker speech, language and communication training. That was delivered online, so unfortunately the pandemic impacted on our delivery of that, but didn't stop. So we converted very quickly from a planned face-to-face delivery to an live online delivery method. So between November 20 and July 21, it was delivered online. It's now available as a recorded session that anyone can access on the Tiny Talkers website. And the professionals that have accessed that have been early years professionals, health, early help, social care, inclusion support, libraries and museums. It really is across the wider children's workforce. In addition, 93% of, or as part of that, 93% of group childcare providers and 67% of our schools have accessed the training. And we have further levels of that training. So a further 265 early years professionals have accessed our enhanced plus English and English as an additional language training. So a huge amount of investment has gone into upskilling the workforce around speech, language and communication. Next slide, please. So just an example of outcomes. So a recent Ofsted inspection of one of our day nurseries in Rotherham received an outstanding judgment, and the text up there is a direct extract from that Ofsted inspection report. All the staff in this day nursery have undertaken the universal Tiny Talkers training, and a number of staff have also accessed the enhanced and the enhanced plus training. The enhanced plus is accredited level training for speech, language and communication, and that's just an example of the direct impact that it's having in the sector. Next slide, please. And in terms of continued progress, so we've not stopped there. We're well placed, and this is across South Yorkshire. We were well placed to respond to some of the negative impacts of the pandemic. So we know what an impact it's had on the early years sector. So we have developed a further training package called Tiny Talkers Booster Sessions. So this is for childcare providers and schools to use, and it's a direct intervention over 10 weeks for any children who've got identified speech, language and communication needs. 79% of group childcare providers and 51% of schools have accessed that training so far. We only started to deliver it in January. And just some examples of the comments that we're receiving, the feedback that we're receiving so far. So we had a School Foundation 1 class who said it has actually prevented them making any referrals to the speech and language service in the spring term. And a day nursery who've put 12 children through the programme. Only 2 of those 12 they're going to have to refer on to SALT. That number would have been much higher without the intervention.
Okay, I'm really sorry. I'm really conscious of time, and we've got colleagues from Doncaster. Can I just, how much longer in terms of the presentation? Is okay. Perfect.
So
There we go.
If you go to the next slide, it's linked in. So basically, we just wanted to highlight that whilst that speech and language intervention has been really successful, and we are really proud of it, and we're looking at maximising that to try and reduce the referrals that are coming into speech and language. We wanted to do that. There is still something around the absolute increase in demand, which isn't just pandemic related.
Thank you. I'm really sorry to kind of cut you, but thank you for that. I'm conscious also that actually that particular speech and language work links into a conversation that we were having with Book Trust and kind of a bunch of things that I think we could potentially work on. I know Rotherham had Imagination Library, who, as a former Book Trust employee, were our sworn enemies, but we don't talk about Dolly Parton. It's fine. Thank you very much. I think what we'll probably do is invite any quick questions for Rotherham, albeit, like I say, I'm conscious of time. Is there anybody who wants to ask anything specifically about the Rotherham presentation? No. Okay, in which case, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I invite colleagues from Doncaster to join us? So you press the right-hand button and then you just say, next slide, please. And it's as if by magic, it just appears.
Wonderful.
So it's all voice activated. It's brilliant.
You have to excuse our pieces of paper. I actually don't have enough vision to see the screen. So excuse the piece of paper which will go. That's the honesty of it, really, isn't it?
Can I just ask, we've probably got about sort of 10 minutes maximum.
That's
So
fine.
thank you.
That's fine, yeah. We will only need 10 minutes. Thank you for inviting us. I'm Stephanie Douglas. I'm Head of Early Intervention and Prevention for Doncaster Council. And as such, under my portfolio sits early help, family hubs and early years. This is my colleague.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Carrie Wardle. I'm a public health specialist and lead for children and young people at Doncaster Council.
We will only be 10 minutes today. We've just come to share a case study of a situation where we've integrated services to provide a unified 1,001 days offer for children, for families across Doncaster. So next slide, please. Thank you. See, I can't see that at any price whatsoever, so forgive me. I will be honest if I have to look down rather than up. This is really one strand of a piece of work that came out of Doncaster's Place Plan that we put together in 2016, 2019, and then we had COVID in the middle as well, didn't we? So that some of these plans for this particular activity have rolled on a little bit further as a result of COVID. So the Place Plan highlighted the opportunity to improve outcomes for families and to reduce the demand on intervention at an early stage for those families. We started to look at what we knew about families and particularly what families told us in Doncaster about what they needed from the womb, really. I don't come from South Yorkshire, but it was always where I come from. It was always looked from a womb to worm approach. So, you know, it works. People don't forget that one. But this is the womb end of that approach. But you know, the vision that if we provide a really strong best start for children and for families, they will benefit right up for the next 50 years at least of their lives. So we looked at what we knew about what we had in place for those families, and we were very well aware that our take up of the 2-year-old offer for free entitlement, funded entitlement places for our children across Doncaster was very high. We know that at least 85% of our families access those entitlement places for their funded 2-year-olds, for the families that were entitled. We were pleased with that, and outcomes for those children were good. We knew that we had a very strong integrated progress check model as well, where children again within the 24 to 30 months of their lives had a progress check with their parents, with their early years providers, and in Doncaster alongside their health visitors and community nursery nurses. Very strong, recognised nationally, was working really, really well. But we then had a look at our other figures and we began to see that in actual fact, our 0 to 2-year-olds, 58.9% of them accessed interventions in some way, which was quite startling really when you think about it, because by the time they reach 5, we know that they're in line with the national averages, including in speech and language as they come out of reception. But in those early days, those 1,001 days, a huge number of children access and families access support of one kind or another, and that could be a range of
send support from our early years teams within the council, or support from a health visitor for breastfeeding, or any of those initiatives that are out there. But it was far higher than we wanted it to be. And being somewhat pragmatic, I think, really, as a group of, as a council-led group, we wanted to know what families wanted. And families told us they wanted a nana or a grandma. They actually wanted somebody to be there with them at the point at which they either got pregnant or a baby was born. They didn't get the time that they, not a criticism, but the time that they necessarily wanted with a midwife. And if they wanted some support, they wanted to pick up a phone to somebody that they felt comfortable with and have a discussion. And that really formed a very strong part of our initial thoughts, really, because families told us that constantly in our family hub discussions. So we decided that we would look and shine a light on the first 1001 days, on particularly looking at what a multidisciplinary partnership, what a team of people would tell us that was possible. So for a period of time, we were able to have health visitors, midwives, early years workers from our family hubs, plus colleagues from public health, and a whole range of other services to work together for 6 months and to spend some real time talking to families, looking at what we already did and deciding where it didn't quite work and what were the possibilities, which was, I think in many ways a luxury, isn't it, to take time and a bit of a step back and go, okay, what do we really want? If we were brave, what would we want to do? And we were able to redesign our model for the first 1001 days, from conception right through to a child's second birthday. And we produced a very detailed integrated model that delivered against the what we planned to do through the place plan. Having done that, we had a quite thick, quite deep document that we all went, goodness me, yes, that's right, that works. Now, exactly how we're going to translate that into practice, and being quite pragmatic about it, we then decided that it wasn't possible to roll that out right across Doncaster, which was our initial thought. That's where we would go. And we settled upon 2 areas where families particularly told us they wanted support of the need a nana kind. We have a need a nana programme where they call them nanas, where nanas, you know, somebody will act in a voluntary capacity, and they wanted more of that, please. They actually wanted somebody to show them how to change a nappy, somebody who'd tell them how to settle a baby that they were desperate with. And we actually decided that in these 2 particular areas, that's where we would undertake our pilot. So one was an ex-mining community, and the other was a very diverse inner city area. The ex-mining community, quite insular, stayed very much within the boundaries of the roads. We always say Doncaster is a place of places, and that was their place. And they didn't necessarily want to go out of there to access support. And we knew that, but we knew that they were asking for support. We were very fortunate. We were able to secure funding from the Better Care Fund for a 2-year pilot. We actually managed to spin it out a little bit longer with COVID and with staffing. So we are only just coming to the end of that pilot now. We match fund some of that by releasing our staffing from the family hubs. And that's the background really to the project that we put in place. So I'm going to ask if Carrie will then talk us through how it actually looked, so you see what it's like on the ground.
Yes, so as Steph said, we had essentially 2 what we dubbed the early days teams operating in the 2 areas of Doncaster, each team consisting of a midwife, a health visitor, and 2 of our early days key workers. And as Steph mentioned, the key workers were essentially kind of a mashup of what was our community nursery nurses that are traditionally sat within health visiting pathway, and our family support workers, which traditionally sit within the sort of children's centre family hub model. So the idea being that this one worker had an array of expertise and knowledge around anything and everything to do with being pregnant and having a baby, so they could really offer that support right from conception up to the second birthday. And as Steph said, one of the main aims of this programme was to really try and intervene early with families, make sure that we're steering them away from those more expensive and obviously more distressing elements of care that families may need further down the line should an issue become a real problem if it's not addressed early. So as you can see, our key worker, in reality, for me, I think what we were really testing was this key worker role, and did it add value over the standard care pathway, which was obviously the midwifery and the health visiting pathway. And as you can see, what was really key was this key worker works alongside the midwife, works alongside the health visitor, and there's constant communication there, and that they're making sure that where the family needs additional support that is perhaps out of the midwife or health visitor's remit, that key worker can step in and support. So we allocated the key worker to 10 contacts, so that was throughout the antenatal and postnatal period. I should say that that was a universal offer, but it was a progressive universal offer, so it's very much depending on the need of the family. If they didn't need the full 10 contacts, they didn't have the full 10 contacts, and vice versa if a family was had slightly more complex needs. I think one of the interesting things that has come out is the different uses of the key workers just in those two different areas of Doncaster. So, for example, in Hexthorpe, very much the key worker was focused, or we had a large volume of issues around, for example, housing and that kind of thing, whereas in Dennerby, the issues that key workers were utilised most and were much more sort of health focused and child development focused. So I think that just really sort of demonstrates the flexibility of the key worker to just really respond to the needs of the people in the area that they're operating in. Next slide, please. Yep. So we've been doing a robust evaluation right from the start of the programme. We wanted to make sure that it was really well evaluated, so we could really unpick what areas of the pilot were working and what were not, and what we wanted to roll forward, which is what we're sort of essentially here today. The full evaluation findings are not available as of yet, but they will be shortly, warts and all. For this slide, I confess, and you'll notice that I have picked out some of the more positive elements, but when I sort of mentioned that we're really testing the key worker role here, it was really important to us that we could see that the key worker was working well. And obviously these initial evaluation findings just to say that we were surveying throughout the pilot, so right from the antenatal period, involving the families and the staff members who were in the pilot teams, making sure that we were constantly getting their feedback and adapting if need be. So I won't go through those, you can obviously read them, but the general feeling was that the key worker role was functioning well. It was doing what we wanted it to do, and working within that multidisciplinary team, it was also adding a lot of value. Like I say, there were absolutely downsides to implementing the model, but those will be available in the full evaluation report.
One last slide. 2 minutes, I promise.
I'm really sorry. We don't really have the time. Do you just have a couple of sentences just to sum up? That'd be
just
brilliant.
to say really is that the question is always, so what then and what next? And what next for us will be that we will feed this through into the Family Hub Start for Life offer and alongside the work that Nicola's doing. So it's come at a good time for us. It dovetails really well into those two initiatives.
Brilliant.
That's all. Okay.
Fab. Thank you. And the work is genuinely, I mean, it looks fab. Thank you for explaining that. I'm really sorry we don't have time for questions unless anyone's got an absolutely burning desire to ask something. No, in which case, thank you very, very much. That was brilliant. Okay, what I'm going to try and do, I'm going to sort of steal 10 minutes from the next meeting, if that's okay, because I know we got kind of a conversation briefly afterwards. So if people are okay to stay for an extra 10 minutes, just to give us a bit more space for a couple of the things that are on this agenda. Is that okay with everybody? Yeah, fab. Okay, bro. In which case, can we move on to item number 8, please, which is Andy and the Harvard Bloomberg program.
Thanks, Chair. I can do this in 7 key points. So you're welcome. A team of 8 of us have come together. That team of 8 includes NHS professionals, public health professionals, Mayoral Combined Authority, voluntary community sector, and others. That team has come together around a problem-driven approach, which is looking at problems, understanding their root causes. Our problem was children and young people's health inequalities and outcomes of being poor and getting worse in South Yorkshire. This group of 8 of us identified a host of issues that we thought we could make an impact on early. One of those, and the subject of this paper, is providing a safe space to sleep for our children and our young people. Why is that important? The paper sets out very clearly that the data is telling us it is important. Just from the referrals to the voluntary community sector, 75% of which are from statutory agencies, about 950 beds were safe spaces to sleep were required last year, and we know that is an underestimate in terms of the issue in front of us. And it is only getting worse. Referrals in year to date demonstrate that we're probably on track to add another 500 or 600 beds just being demanded from the voluntary community sector alone. And I think it's fair to say those beds do not exist. So we're approaching a cliff edge. Very quickly, we know sleep is important. It's important to us. We're grumpy if we don't get enough of it. It is important to the physiology of brains if children don't get enough of it. The research says that the grey matter, the literal grey matter, doesn't develop as much as it should do if children don't get the requisite amount of sleep. That means children are less attentive, their behaviour declines, their ability to remember things declines, and their health from sniffles and colds to more serious stuff is impacted. So the science and the data, I'm no scientist or indeed data analyst, but I'm pretty sure it backs me up on that one. We have tested this proposition, not to death, because you can never test anything to death, but we have tested the proposition that providing a safe space to sleep for our children and young people is fundamental. We've tested that with not all directors of children's services, but a lot of them. We've tested that with public health colleagues. We've tested that with practitioners. We've tested it with some of our family hub colleagues. So we tested it out there. We have certainly not tested it with everyone and anyone. I don't think we ever can. And once you finish that, you probably have to go and start again anyway. But out of that engagement, so far, a team of 8 of us haven't heard anyone say, no, you're not sort of looking at something that is important. Lots of people say there's lots of other stuff to do, and it is evident that lots of those things are happening. But this is a space where some interlocution could make a difference. So that's what we've been working on. I think there's some buts in all of that, is we still don't know enough. Our data is incomplete. As you'll see from the paper, the data we refer to is principally from VCS referrals, and that's not probably capturing all of it by any stretch of the imagination. We know we're not operating in a vacuum. There are things we've heard about today that play into this space. So this isn't something that is to be transplanted on or into. I'm mixing my medical metaphors this afternoon. And we know that we are still going to need to make a case that convinces funders, the Integrated Care Board and other partners, that providing a safe space to sleep both improves outcomes and will save the public purse money further down the track. So that, in essence, leads me to the final 4 points of the paper, which really is we are seeking this partnership support for continuing this work, identifying a proper approach to data so we understand this problem at the granular level, and that's place by place, people by people, family by family. So nailing data is really important. We need to, all of the work that the Harvard Bloomberg says is don't wait to have the perfect product before you start doing something. We want to pilot some initiatives. What we might do in one place might look very, very different to what we might do in another place. But we need to find some places to do it. And Sheena in the earlier presentation made that point to you all. And I think we need that mandate for us to go away and develop that investable proposition business case. And if I'm honest, to hear from this group whether we are on the wrong track on this, because we want to make some progress, but we need the kind of mandate to go and do that. That's me.
Well, thank you. I think it's really important, given that request, that we do actually give this a little bit of space and time, just to make sure it is not just a nodding up through, it is actually genuinely a consent to progress, particularly from places. So if I can ask Kathy and then Greg, please, to come.
I mean, I think this is a really interesting piece of work because it cuts to the very heart of what we're trying to do. I think we need to distinguish between having a bed and having a physical thing and having a safe space to sleep, because they're very, very different things. I mean, I think we need to think about the bed as one part of a wraparound circle that also includes, you know, the right environment and also social and emotional and physical safety of children as well. So I think it has to be, all of that I think has to be wrapped around it so that it doesn't become just about making sure that every child has a bed, because that intervention is not going to make the difference. I think we also need to do a lot of work with parents and guardians about how do they prepare children for sleep? How do they prepare a child's room? How do they make sure the child feels safe and comfortable going to bed, going to sleep? Because that, if that work can happen, that will definitely create healthy, happier children in South Yorkshire.
Thanks, Andrew. Strong support. A few quick questions. Are you happy that you got the right stakeholders within the housing sector of various types and flavours? Is question one. Second, you have clearly strong support for what you set out. No, zero doubt about that. At the risk of pushing it further and making it harder, don't forget damp and mould and Awabishak. And sort of there's a bunch of stuff we can do connecting the housing sector and the health sector really cheaply, really easily, just by connecting sectors together. And I'll come up with some specifics later. I've got a long list of them, but there's a bunch of stuff we can do really easily there.
Anyone on screen want to come in at all? No. Oh, Sheena. Yeah, Sheena, please do.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to respond to Greg's point and Kathy, actually. So I think we recognise that, Kathy, particularly around the bed, and I think that's why we widened it from safe space to sleep, because it is about those wider determinants and those wider impacts in terms of, you know, we know that just providing a bed's not going to solve that family's challenge. And actually we heard a little bit about some of the work that's happening in Doncaster, which sounds really interesting in terms of some of the things that we've thought about in terms of this is it's an entry point. That's what we're starting with, to build that relationship with families, as well as addressing a real need. I think the other point that Greg made around housing is a really important one, and we have already started to engage with housing. So, you know, Andy mentioned earlier about a lot of the kind of testing this out. We've certainly tested it out with housing providers. I know in Barnsley, Burnsley Homes are really keen to be involved. We know that damp and mould's an issue, you know, politically at the moment. It's been an issue for a while, but it's very much in the political agenda at the moment. And so we think that there are opportunities to do that. And I guess that's why it is for place to think about where is best to, you know, pilot some of these approaches so that we can start to sort of, you know, embed this work in the things that are happening already at place, so it doesn't become an additional thing, but actually it runs alongside everything that everybody's doing, and again provides that kind of opportunity to collaborate in a different way, really. And I think that's where the strength of the work is, really around that kind of collaborative approach, which I know is what we're all about here. So those are the kinds of things I just wanted to flag up.
Thank you. Andy, do you want to come at Kat? Do you want to come in? Yeah.
I'm Kat from Baby Basics. Just wanted to kind of flag up, absolutely agree with all the points made, especially around housing and the importance of the safe space, not just a physical bed. But I guess 2 points from me. One is certainly from a Baby Basics perspective, so put my lanyard back on for a moment. Demand for beds is rocketing. I've had 6 requests just today, one for a 6-week-old baby sleeping on a changing mat, and a 1-year-old sibling co-sleeping with the mum. And that is all the support that family needs. Having spoken to their midwife and their health visitor, they don't need more than that. The housing is fine, but that physical bed is needed. And so I think it is a real balance. There are some families where it is around the wider, and it's that breakaway room. For some families, and talking to our health visiting teams, provision of that physical item prevents a further referral to early help. And actually, if we can do real early intervention, we can reduce our costs within our local authorities and our early help services massively. So that was just the 2 points that I wanted to make.
I think probably just in reflection to that, I'm conscious of what you said to me a while ago, which was the amount that we rely on you to offer beds to kids, and we are essentially, as a region, frankly, as a country, relying on charities to make sure that kids have places to sleep. I mean, physical places to sleep.
So of those 6 referrals I received today at Baby Basics Sheffield, all of them from statutory services.
Yeah, yeah. And so we have essentially outsourced in the same way with food banks and other parts of our challenges across communities. We have outsourced this to the charitable sector.
We've done it worse. We've outsourced it without giving them any resources.
Yeah,
which is
absolutely.
even worse.
Yeah,
version
no,
of-
completely. No, you're absolutely right. And I just think that we have to reckon with that. I don't know that we can solve it right now, but we have to reckon with that fact that we are absolutely saying we can't deal with it. Please, can you help us? And I think there has to be a redress to that balance at the very least.
Thanks. Councillor Argento from Sheffield City Council. Mine was along your lines. It's just the report is a summary, and I knew that. But can we quantify the shortfall and how much we are actually relying on voluntary sector organisation? Can we put some figures to this, because we are doing exactly that? Another point for me is just a community point, and how sleeping in different communities is different, and how we're addressing that, and can we put a figure onto that, because it's very easy for us to assume that in all communities, in all cultures, people sleep in the same way, and they don't. And I know this as someone who comes from a different culture and moved here, so I had to be educated when I had my own children and how to put them to sleep.
It's a really important point. I think I'm also conscious of things like, for instance, the impacts of things like air pollution, which is invidious, invisible, but no less a problem in terms of kind of making sure that we're addressing some of those challenges. We've had this conversation haven't we, around the clean air zone, but I think the more we can reinforce that point, the better. Okay, anybody else wants to come in before we just sum up? Yeah, Stephen.
Yeah, quick. Still Stephen Pleasant, still called Wendy on the screen. I shall live with that. This is a general point, really. So I think just a step away, this is exactly what we asked of the group of 8. And that constitute the group of 8 as cross-sector. It include every single one of the 4 areas. Go away, have some reflections about this space, and then start coming back with specifics, which is exactly what they're doing now. And I'm really grateful that actually they're doing that, but actually it's really quite important that we're sponsoring their work actually as well in terms of this. So what we're asking for now, and this is worth a reflection, is our endorsement, but to go away and start building the conversation across directors of place, DCSs, DPHs. So this is about our sponsorship of this work as we build it forward with all the recommendations that sit in that place. And I think that's just a really, really important point just for us to hold on to. Second point, Chair, is there's a language in here which is really quite important, which is about which underpins some of the system conditions that we're trying to address in terms of the strategy, which is to develop an investable proposition. Because at the moment, what we know is this is delivering. This is a priority outcome, an area of priority outcome, which is delivering poor outcomes, and it's costing the system a lot of cash. Despite Pierce's your point, it's still very expensive. It's creating lots of failure in the system, which is being mopped up by statutory services downstream. The investable proposition is to design something collectively which actually gets upstream of that, which is going to require investment, but is going to both improve outcomes and reduce costs. And it's that sponsorship which is critical in this conversation. And I think just in terms of as something which is emblematic of what we're trying to do, I think it's a really quite a powerful agenda item.
Agree entirely, Kevin.
Hi, thanks. I'm Gavin Boyle, I'm Chief Executive of NHS South Yorkshire the Integrated Care Board. Just a couple of quick points, one specific, one general. The specific point was really support the safe space to sleep proposal. I think it's a terrific idea. I think one of the challenges I think you gave us, Oliver, was that the work we do needed to be actionable. It needed to be linked to practical steps we could take. What I really like about this, it isn't boil the ocean. It's really specific, it's focused, and you could do it. So just to say, I really support that. My general point is we've just had an incredibly rich experience this afternoon in terms of the presentations we've had. I thought the place presentations were excellent. I mean, clearly fantastic things to build on already happening in place. Children and Young People's Alliance work around health inequalities and early intervention just completely resonates with our children and young people's objective within the strategy. I think there's probably an obvious point though about how do we kind of weave these threads together to come up with something where we get synergy, because they're sort of overlapping and connected. But I think we probably need to do that in an organised way. Not quite sure how, but I think that's a question we've got to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think what we're saying is brilliant. Definitely want to support the work. Please go away and carry on doing what you're doing. Albeit, let's weave some of that together where we can. We need an investable proposition to actually take some of this forward. But broadly speaking, it's brilliant, and we want you to carry on doing that work. From my perspective, you're absolutely right. I asked for a sort of solution to a problem, and that's absolutely what you're delivering. And it couldn't be more important. The problem that you focused on couldn't be more important. So genuinely grateful to that. And I'm going to be brutal and say, unless it is genuinely,
Pick it up after.
Can you? Is that possible?
Yep.
Yeah,
I've got one that I want to put in, and that's sleep deprivation. It's no use having a bed if you don't get to sleep.
Yes.
And that's important going forward as well, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. I'm going to move us on. Thank you to our NHS 5-year joint forward plan for South Yorkshire, a small item on the agenda, which we now need to deal with in roughly 3 to 6 minutes. But yeah, if you could lead us through that, please, Marion.
Brilliant, I've pressed the button right this time. So hopefully you've had an opportunity to have a look at the update paper that I shared. So what I won't do is reiterate some of the things in there with respect to the expectation around the joint forward plan. What we really want to spend the time sharing with you today is some of the hot off the press engagement findings that are coming through, because I'm mindful that we made a commitment, didn't we, in our integrated care strategy to ongoing engagement, and part of that we're taking forward to inform the development of our NHS joint forward plan. So if it is okay, Joe, I have got a few slides because I think that'd be the bit that people are particularly interested in. So I'm going to share my screen, Andy, and then I will take us through and then let you take over for the engagement bit. So with respect to the NHS Joint Forward Plan, we have talked about this before, haven't we? So we know that it's an expectation for the Integrated Care Board, together with trusts, that we can use it as a shared delivery plan for our integrated care strategy, and that we have an ask to develop an initial joint forward plan for South Yorkshire by the end of June. And that's the plan that we share with NHS England by the end of June. Now, there is an expectation that we review that annually, and there's an understanding really that that will be our first plan. So it's not dissimilar to our integrated care strategy in that respect, in terms of the fact that it will be our first plan. So in the paper, I set out a bit of the context around the national guidance. So that included what expected to cover. It included the approach that we've taken, which has been very much a collaborative approach, working across our system, identifying leads across our places, provider collaboratives and alliances with their kind of expert knowledge that have helped us to start to inform what that plan might look like. We've also very much set the context of our plan aligned to our integrated care strategy. So it very much is about how we respond to our bold ambitions alongside the NHS universal commitment. So they're the things that were described in the long-term plan, as well as how we support our system to deliver on the core purposes of an integrated care system. We've got a coordination group that has been bringing this together for us, and we've worked hard to ensure that our year one plan very much aligns with the operational plan for the NHS for 23-24. So if what I do there is I hand over to Andy for what is actually the really interesting bit, which is what we are learning from the kind of onward engagement work that we're doing that's shaping how we bring together our joint forward plan.
Thanks, Mariana. So I think I kind of want to give the reassurance that obviously this group has given us some really constructive comments in the past about our engagement approach the first time, and we had the same from Healthwatch colleagues as well. So the reassurance is we've built in all of that those comments and that feedback that you gave us into the process we're now taking forward on the 5-year forward view. So as always, it seems to always be a three-pronged approach, and it's the same in this instance. So we are working with Healthwatch colleagues to reach underserved communities. We are using our programs to tap into our communities and citizens in that way. And we have got another campaign underway again to reach our wider communities and ask them what they think. Next slide, Mariana. So really clearly, aims of the involvement is to inform the joint forward plan, to build on the ICP strategy work that we've done previously, and to try and reach those underserved groups that we hadn't managed to get to the first time around, which I think is really, really important. The engagement is going to continue to the 2nd of June. So as always, it seems to be with these things, I think we've got a few more days than we had last time, but not a monstrous amount of time. Yeah. So this is live feedback, so it's going to continue on into the start of the next month. So just to give you a flavour of some of the many organisations we've heard from, you can see it's a really, really wide sort of group now that we've managed to pull in to tell us what they think. And then Mariana, if you just touch on the next slide, to give that additional reassurance about getting those underserved communities and their voice into this piece of engagement and involvement. So so a huge wide range of people that are taking part. Next slide, please. And then kind of the 3 questions we're asking: what matters to people's health and well-being, what are the barriers to accessing services, and the ways of improving the quality of care received. So I guess the 3 important slides that you want to see, and again, like I say, this is live. So what matters to you about your health and well-being? So access is one of the things that keeps coming up again and again. So access to GP services, in this instance, accessible and affordable transport to appointments, better communications with healthcare, being able to have the information and tools to manage better health. So those are the sort of emerging themes that are coming out at the moment. Next slide, please. And then we're getting barriers that people face. So not knowing where to access information and advice, unconscious bias around race, gender, religion, and other areas, information barriers, digital exclusion, affordability. So some really clear barriers coming out of what our communities are telling us. And then in addition to that, we've got some suggestions for improvement. So we've got better access to information in different formats, more affordable ways of accessing services and treatments, making the environment safe, and much more. So some really rich feedback coming out through this this engagement activity. And then just a final slide on this particular part is the perspective of healthcare professionals. So obviously the feedback the last time around was we really need to hear the voice of our 72,000 people who work in health and care as well. And what those colleagues are telling us is a recognition of the pressures that they're under due to a lack of resources, the importance of work-life balance, feeling valued, being protected from abuse, all those things that we potentially expect to come out of that. And then one last slide, where do we go from here? Well, like I say, the engagement and involvement is still ongoing for another 10 days or so, and we are encouraging our NHS trusts to compete with each other to see who can get their staff to respond the most as well. So, which is always a good technique for encouraging involvement.
You can tell us who's won at the next meeting. Okay, I'm just going to very quick comments and reflections, and then I'm also going to say that can people please pick this up? I'm really conscious of the lack of time, and I'm sorry about that. Can people please pick this up with colleagues outside of this meeting as well? Because I think there's never going to be enough time around the table to be able to have this conversation properly. So if people can kind of offer in thoughts and reflections outside the meeting as well, I think that would be a good idea. But yes, Greg.
Great, thank you for doing that. Great effort on the diversity of voices on skim of it. Massive effort, well done for that. Something about getting a crisp narrative on the differences between the NHS Forward Plan, the ICP strategy, and Health and Wellbeing Board to Bob in Burngreave, they're all the same. So working out the difference on there. Just an observation: who asks what matters to well-being frames the answer. I saw what you'd said. I wouldn't disagree with anything on that table, but I bet you nobody mentioned clean air, clean water, crap houses, lack of income, etc. That kind of matters as well. And this is about an NHS Forward Plan, but but just kind of thinking that one through needs a bit of thought and fancy footwork, I think.
I think it's a really important point, actually. Thank you, Greg. Any other last comments or questions? Anybody? Yes. Okay.
Sorry, just to add to that, it's the climate crisis is really important because we talk about the impact of migration and war and all of that, but we are on the threshold of climate crisis, and that will have an impact on all of us because people will migrate because of that. And we need to, it's not 10 years away, it's 2-3 years away.
And more broadly, I mean, the impact of climate breakdown on our health. So no, I think it's absolutely right. Okay, unless anybody's got any more comments, but like I say, please do genuinely, please do pick that up with colleagues outside the room, because I think it's a hugely important piece of work and we need to engage fully with it. Okay, Ruth has assured me she can do this in 2 minutes, I was promised. So as it is increasingly becoming known, the HEAP too late, I'm afraid, is stuck. Ruth, could you please tell us more?
Yeah, so Ruth Spear, I'm a consultant in public health, work in the MCN across the ICB, and Greg, you should have picked up on it earlier if you didn't with it. So just a very quick update, the Health Equity Advisory Panel, which is a better way of describing it, that's chaired by Professor Alan Walker, reporting back on behalf of Oliver, will be described. We're in the second meeting that we've had, and we're on that journey over the next period of time to September. So we've got a bit further with the work. We've kind of bit clear on the scope and the focus. The output will be a blueprint for action. We don't want it to be a big strategy that sits on the shelf, doesn't get used. So that's the focus of the group. And we're hoping to have an interim report back to the Mayor in September. The focus is really going to be on the structural issues. It's going to be on the wider determinants of health rather than healthcare and healthcare services, and also focusing on the building blocks of health rather than individual behaviours. So what creates those conditions for people to live healthy lives and focus on that well-being and quality of life. It's going to be based on the principles of proportional universalism and equity. So the aim is that this will complement the ICP strategy, in particular those areas of the strategy around strong and vibrant communities, people with the skills and resources and the need that they need to thrive. We recognise that insight is really important, but because of the short time frame, it's difficult to see how we can do that in a meaningful way between now and September. So we're going to draw in the great insight work that the ICP have done and also other partners, and then we're going to sort of develop a sort of an engagement plan with key partners as the work progresses, so that we're keeping people informed of the work and bringing in expertise and advice from voluntary and community sector, local authorities, health partners, etc. So we've also got the postdoc is now in place in the University of Sheffield, will also help to bring some of that insight and evidence together so that we can look at it in a meaningful way. That's it.
Model of brevity. Thank you very much. Okay, again, please do pick any questions up about the HEAP with Ruth or Stephen, but it is I think a fantastic piece of work and it is progressing wonderfully. It says in my minutes that I get concluding comments and any other business. So any other business first? Anybody? No? In which case I will keep my concluding comments very brief, just to say I'm always wonderfully struck by this meeting and the energy in the room whenever we do this. I go to other meetings, naming no names, bus companies, and it is not always a positive experience, but I get to share this meeting, which I love, because there is a bunch of people who all are here because we genuinely want to try and change people's experience of health and wellbeing in South Yorkshire, and I love it. And so thank you everybody for everything you're doing and will continue to do, particularly the colleagues who joined us to share what they're doing in places, because it really sort of brings home, I think, the energy that is happening right across South Yorkshire. And so long may that continue and grow. And the date of the next meeting is the 27th of July. So I will look forward to seeing you again then. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.